There was once a man who decided to count the hours of his life, not in the way most do, watching the clock during mundane tasks, waiting for the weekend, or counting down to retirement. No, this man counted how many hours he devoted to what truly mattered to him. After 1 week, he sat stunned at his kitchen table, paper in hand, looking at a number so small it shook him to his core. 7 hours. Out of 168 hours in a week, he had spent only 7 pursuing what he claimed was his life's purpose. 7 hours chasing excellence while the rest disappeared into the fog of average living. The truth is painful, isn't it? We drift through life declaring we want success, happiness, fulfillment, yet our actions tell a different story. We dabble, we sample, we dip our toes in the water of greatness, then retreat to the comfortable shores of mediocrity. Today we face a choice that defines not just our careers or bank accounts, but the very essence of our lives. Be obsessed or be average. Average is easy. Average requires no commitment. Average demands nothing extraordinary from you. Average will gladly take your days, your years, your life, and return nothing remarkable in exchange. But I didn't come here to discuss average. Average isn't why you're listening. Deep inside, you sense there's something more calling to you. Obsession. The word itself makes some uncomfortable. We've been conditioned to view obsession as unhealthy, excessive, extreme. But what if the greatest achievements in human history came precisely from this dangerous territory? Consider the greatest works of art, the most profound scientific discoveries, the most successful businesses. Behind each stands a person consumed by a singular focus, possessed by a vision that wouldn't let them rest. They weren't balanced, they weren't moderate, they were obsessed. The Oxford English Dictionary defines obsession as an idea or thought that continually preoccupies or intrudes on a person's mind. What a beautiful definition. What magnificent potential lies in being continually preoccupied with an idea that matters deeply. Have you ever watched a child learning something new? A boy with his first chemistry set mixing solutions until late into the night. A girl with a paintbrush losing track of time as colors blend on canvas. They don't watch the clock. They don't count the cost. They don't worry about being too interested. They simply immerse themselves completely. Somewhere along the way, we lost that capacity for immersion. We became sensible. We learned to spread ourselves thin, to multitask, to maintain proper balance. And in pursuing this balance, many of us have balanced ourselves right into mediocrity. Look around. The world is filled with people going through the motions, collecting paychecks, watching the clock, living for weekends, dreading Mondays. They've accepted the bargain of average, exchanging their potential for predictability. Is that the bargain you want to make with your one precious life? The great achievements of civilization weren't created by people with mild interest. The light bulb wasn't invented by someone who thought, I'll work on this electricity thing for precisely 1 hour per day, no more, no less. The polio vaccine wasn't developed by someone who said, I'll think about children's health from 9 to 5, but after that I'm done. No. These breakthroughs came from individuals gripped by purpose, possessed by possibility, unable and unwilling to rest until they'd made their vision real. I can hear the objections forming. But isn't obsession dangerous? Doesn't it lead to burnout, to neglected relationships, to imbalance? These are valid concerns if your obsession is trivial, destructive, or meaningless. But I'm talking about healthy obsession being consumed by something that brings value, that contributes, that matters. This kind of obsession doesn't diminish life, it expands it. A healthy obsession isn't about workaholism or neglecting important relationships. It's about bringing extraordinary focus and commitment to what matters most. It's about refusing to squander your talents and opportunities on pursuits that don't truly engage your heart and mind. Let me ask you, what do you think about when your mind is free to wander? What topic makes you lose track of time? What work doesn't feel like work? What would you pursue even if no one paid you, praised you, or noticed you doing it? Hidden in your answer is the seed of your potential obsession, not just a job or hobby, but your unique contribution to the world. Throughout human history, it's the obsessed ones who've moved us forward. While the average mind says, that's good enough, the obsessed mind says, I can make this better. While the average mind says, that's just how things are, the obsessed mind says, things don't have to be this way. The average person sees obstacles and turns back. The obsessed person sees the same obstacles and finds a way through, around, or over them. Where others see dead ends, the obsessed find detours. Consider this. Have you ever been so absorbed in an activity that time seemed to disappear? Psychologists call this state flow, when challenge and skill meet in perfect harmony, creating a sense of timeless engagement. This state of flow is where our greatest satisfaction and achievement exist. And yet, how many hours of your typical week are spent in this state? For most, the answer is troubling. We spend our days distracted, divided, skimming the surface of life rather than diving deep. We've become professional dabblers in a world that rewards the deeply dedicated. The tragedy isn't that we lack capacity for obsession. We all have it. The tragedy is that we've been taught to fear it, to restrain it, to channel it into responsible mediocrity. Society celebrates the well-rounded individual, but look at history. The people who transformed industries, revolutionized art, advanced science, they weren't well-rounded. They were sharp and focused at one end, with their energy channeled like a laser rather than scattered like a floodlight. Mozart didn't excel at music and 20 other hobbies. Marie Curie didn't divide her attention equally between scientific research and a dozen other pursuits. They poured themselves into their singular passion. They became obsessed. Now, this doesn't mean narrowness of mind or interest. Often the opposite is true. The obsessed individual sees connections others miss precisely because they've gone so deep into their subject. They develop nuanced understanding that the dabbler can never achieve. Understand this. When I speak of obsession, I'm not advocating mindless activity or busy work. I'm talking about purposeful, passionate immersion in something meaningful. I'm talking about choosing to concentrate your finite energy on what matters most rather than dispersing it across what matters least. Average spreads itself thin. Obsession goes deep. Average seeks comfort. Obsession seeks mastery. Average asks, what's the least I need to do? Obsession asks, what's the most I can become? There's a voice inside you that knows the truth of what I'm saying. Perhaps it's been quiet lately, drowned out by the noise of everyday concerns, but it's still there, waiting for you to listen. That voice knows you were meant for more than going through the motions. It knows that inside you is potential far greater than anything you've expressed so far. It knows that your deepest fulfillment will come not from sampling life's buffet, but from mastering the particular dish you were born to create. I can almost hear the whispered objection, but I have responsibilities, I have bills to pay. I don't have the luxury of obsession. This is the great misconception that obsession is a luxury rather than a necessity. The truth is exactly opposite. It's average that's expensive. Average costs you your potential, your fulfillment, your sense of purpose. Average taxes your spirit in ways no income tax could match. Obsession isn't something you need a trust fund to pursue. It doesn't require perfect circumstances. Obsession finds a way with whatever resources are available. Some of history's most obsessed individuals began with nothing but their determination. They didn't wait for ideal conditions. They created conditions where their obsession could thrive. How many hours of your day are currently consumed by habit rather than conscious choice? How much time disappears into activities that neither challenge nor fulfill you? What if you redirected even a fraction of that time towards something that deeply matters? Small shifts can trigger profound changes. 15 minutes of focused effort each day accumulates into 91 hours over a year. That's more than 2 full work weeks devoted to your obsession that would otherwise be lost to routine. But time isn't the only resource we can redirect. There's also attention. In our distracted age, sustained attention has become rare and therefore valuable. The person who can focus deeply for extended periods possesses a superpower. Average attention flits from one stimulus to another, never settling long enough to penetrate beneath the surface. Obsessed attention drills down, breaking through layers, discovering treasures that casual observation would never reveal. What could you accomplish if you trained your attention like an athlete trains their body? What depths could you reach if you refused to be pulled in a dozen directions at once? The capacity for obsession exists within you right now. It doesn't require special talent or advantage, only the courage to commit fully to something that matters. I can see a question forming in your mind. But how do I know what to be obsessed with? How do I find my true calling? The answer may be simpler than you think. Your obsession has likely been whispering to you for years. It's that interest you keep returning to, that problem you can't stop thinking about, that activity that energizes rather than depletes you. Your obsession isn't something you need to manufacture. It's something you need to recognize and embrace. Often it's hiding in plain sight, disguised as a mere hobby or just a passing interest, because you've been taught that serious pursuits shouldn't be so engaging, so natural, so fulfilling. But what if the thing that comes most naturally to you, the thing that feels like play rather than work, is precisely the thing you're meant to pursue with all your heart? What if your greatest contribution comes not from forcing yourself into a conventional mold, but from going all in on your distinctive strengths and interests? Here's a powerful truth. The world doesn't need more people doing work they tolerate. The world needs people so connected to their purpose that their energy becomes contagious, their standards become inspiring, their results become transformative. Average accepts what is. Obsession creates what could be. The question isn't whether you have the capacity for obsession, you do. The question is whether you'll direct that capacity towards something meaningful or let it remain dormant while you settle for less than you're capable of. Make no mistake, the choice between obsession and average is made daily, hourly, moment by moment. It's made in how you spend your time, where you focus your attention, what standards you hold yourself to, what risks you're willing to take. And it's a choice with consequences that compound over time. Small daily acts of obsession, choosing focused work over distraction, learning over comfort, excellence over adequacy, accumulate into extraordinary outcomes that no single heroic effort could produce. Likewise, small daily surrenders to average, taking the path of least resistance, accepting good enough, postponing meaningful action, compound into a life of quiet regret, of potential never realized. Which path are you on right now? Are your daily choices moving you toward obsession or average? Be honest with yourself. This isn't about judgment, but awareness, the essential first step toward change. If you find yourself on the path of average, know this. You can change direction starting today, not through some dramatic gesture, but through small, deliberate choices that align with the person you're capable of becoming. Start by identifying one area where excellence matters deeply to you. It might be your work, a creative pursuit, a relationship, your health, or personal growth. Now ask, what would obsession look like in this area? Not toxic or imbalanced obsession, but healthy, purposeful commitment to mastery and meaning. What would you do differently if you were truly obsessed with excellence in this domain? What standards would you set? What habits would you develop? What would you need to learn? What comfort zones would you need to leave? These questions begin to map the territory between where you are and where obsession could take you. They reveal the gap between average and extraordinary in practical, actionable terms. But know this, the path of obsession isn't always smooth or comfortable. There will be resistance from others, from circumstances, and most powerfully, from within yourself. External resistance comes in many forms. Some will question your commitment. Why are you working so hard, they'll ask. Why can't you just be content? Some may feel threatened by your pursuit of excellence as it holds a mirror to their own compromises. Then there's circumstantial resistance, the obstacles, setbacks, and failures that test your resolve. Make no mistake, if you choose obsession, you choose struggle. Not the empty struggle of living below your potential, but the meaningful struggle of growth, of stretching beyond your current limitations. But the greatest resistance comes from within, from the part of you that fears change, that craves comfort, that whispers, "Who are you to aspire to greatness?" This inner resistance grows louder precisely when you're on the right track, when you're pushing boundaries that need to be pushed. The average person interprets these forms of resistance as signs to retreat. The obsessed person recognizes them as necessary steps on the path to mastery. Where others see reasons to quit, the obsessed see opportunities to prove their commitment. When you truly understand what's at stake, the difference between a life of purpose and a life of quiet desperation, resistance becomes not an obstacle, but a gateway. Each form of resistance overcome strengthens your capacity for the next challenge. Consider any skill you've mastered or goal you've achieved in the past. Wasn't it the overcoming of resistance that made the achievement meaningful? Wasn't it the struggle that transformed, not just your circumstances, but your character? This is the paradox of obsession. The path of greatest resistance often leads to the greatest fulfillment. Not because struggle itself is valuable, but because worthy pursuits inevitably involve breaking through barriers. The world tries to convince us that ease and comfort should be our primary aims, but look at your own experience. When have you felt most alive, most engaged, most proud of yourself? Was it when things came easily, or when you pushed beyond what you thought were your limits? There's a profound difference between the temporary pleasure of avoiding challenge and the lasting satisfaction of overcoming it. Average chooses the former. Obsession embraces the latter. I want you to consider something. Every significant human achievement began as a problem that could have been avoided. Every breakthrough started as a challenge someone could have walked away from. Every masterpiece emerged from struggle that could have been escaped. The Wright brothers could have accepted that human flight was impossible. Jonas Salk could have decided that conquering polio was too difficult. Rosa Parks could have given up her bus seat without protest. They could have chosen the path of average, the path of accepting things as they are. Instead, they chose obsession. They chose to confront problems that others avoided. They chose to persist when others would have surrendered. And in doing so, they didn't just solve problems. They transformed human possibility. You may not be trying to invent flight or cure disease or change social systems. Your obsession may be more personal, creating a thriving business, mastering an art form, becoming an exceptional parent, transforming your health, or developing your character. Whatever your domain, the principle remains. Average accepts the boundaries of the possible. Obsession expands them. This is why society needs the obsessed. Not just for the innovations they create, but for the standards they set, for the example they provide of what's possible when we refuse to settle. In a world that constantly pulls toward mediocrity, the obsessed serve as counterweights, reminding us that we're capable of more than we've been conditioned to believe. In this way, healthy obsession isn't selfish, it's a profound service to others. But let's be practical. How do you cultivate obsession in a world designed to keep you average? First, recognize that attention is your most precious resource. More than money, more than time, your attention determines the quality of your experience and the impact of your efforts. Average attention produces average results. Begin by ruthlessly eliminating distractions that fragment your focus. This doesn't mean living like a hermit. It means making conscious choices about what deserves your attention rather than responding to whatever screams loudest for it. Second, surround yourself with evidence of possibility. Study the obsessed in your field. Learn their stories, not just their triumphs, but their struggles, their doubts, their failures. See in their journeys a reflection of your own potential path. Third, redesign your environment to support your obsession rather than undermine it. Your physical space, your daily schedule, the people you spend time with, all these environmental factors either fuel your obsession or dilute it. Fourth, develop a tolerance for productive discomfort. Growth happens at the edge of your abilities, where you're stretched but not broken. The obsessed don't avoid this discomfort, they seek it out, recognizing it as the sensation of expansion. Fifth, establish feedback systems that keep you honest. Track your progress, measure what matters. Seek input from those qualified to assess your work. Don't hide from the truth of where you stand relative to your potential. And finally, connect your obsession to something larger than yourself. The most sustainable obsessions aren't driven by ego alone, but by a sense of purpose, a desire to contribute, to solve meaningful problems, to leave things better than you found them. When your obsession serves something beyond yourself, it taps into a wellspring of energy and resilience that self-centered pursuits never access. It transforms work from a burden into a calling. Now let me address a concern that may be forming in your mind. Does being obsessed mean I can only focus on one thing? Must I sacrifice everything else? This is another misconception about obsession. Healthy obsession doesn't require you to become one-dimensional. In fact, it often enhances other areas of your life by developing transferable qualities like discipline, focus, resilience, and excellence. What obsession does require is clarity about priorities. It demands that you stop pretending everything can be equally important. It insists that you make conscious choices about where your best energy goes rather than distributing it evenly across every domain. This isn't about sacrifice as much as alignment. When you align your resources, your time, attention, energy, with your deepest values and highest aspirations, what feels like sacrifice from the outside feels like integrity from within. The obsessed don't experience their focus as deprivation. They experience it as liberation, freedom from the exhausting pretense that everything matters equally, freedom to pour themselves fully into what truly counts. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine looking back on your life from its conclusion. From that vantage point, what will matter more, that you maintained perfect balance or that you made a meaningful difference? That you avoided criticism or that you created something valuable? That you stayed safely within conventional boundaries or that you expanded what was possible in your chosen domain? The average life plays it safe. It seeks approval. It follows established paths. It prioritizes security over significance. And it ends with the haunting question, what might have been if I'd had the courage to go all in? The obsessed life isn't without regrets, but they're different regrets. Not what if I had tried, but what if I had tried even sooner, gone even further, given even more. Not regrets of action, but regrets of insufficient action. Which set of regrets would you rather live with? I believe there's a voice inside you that already knows the answer. A voice that recognizes the truth of what I'm saying. A voice that's been waiting for permission to pursue excellence without apology. Consider this your permission slip. Not from me, but from the part of yourself that knows what you're truly capable of. The part that's wearied by halfway measures and compromised standards. The part that's ready to experience the particular joy that comes from full engagement with a worthy pursuit. Here's something few talk about. There's a special kind of happiness available only to those who commit themselves completely to something they value deeply. It's not the fleeting happiness of pleasure or acquisition. It's the enduring satisfaction of meaningful achievement, of becoming what you're capable of becoming. The average person never tastes this happiness because it exists beyond the boundaries of comfort and convenience. It requires a journey into territory that average avoids, the territory of full commitment, of persistent effort, of standards that exceed what others consider reasonable. But those who make this journey discover something remarkable. The struggle that seemed like a burden becomes a source of energy. The focus that seemed like restriction becomes a form of freedom. The standards that seemed excessive become the foundation of pride and fulfillment. This transformation from seeing commitment as constraint to experiencing it as liberation marks the threshold between average and obsessed. It's the moment when I have to do this becomes I get to do this. When work becomes not what you do, but who you are becoming through what you do. Have you experienced this shift? Do you know the difference between half-hearted involvement and whole-souled commitment? Between going through the motions and being fully alive in your pursuits? If you've tasted this difference even once, you know what I'm talking about. You know that there are two fundamentally different ways of engaging with life, the way of average and the way of obsession. And you know which one leads to regret and which to fulfillment. The question isn't which path is easier. Average is undoubtedly easier in the short term. The question is which path is worth traveling, which leads to a destination you actually want to reach. The path of average leads to predictable outcomes, competence without excellence, security without significance, comfort without deep satisfaction. It's not a terrible path. Millions walk it every day. But is it worthy of what's best in you? The path of obsession leads to different outcomes. Mastery rather than mere competence, impact rather than mere security, meaning rather than mere comfort. This path has higher costs but offers rewards that average cannot imagine, much less attain. The tragedy is that many choose average not because they prefer its outcomes, but because they fear the demands of obsession. They choose the known limitations of average over the unknown possibilities of full commitment. But what if the greatest risk isn't trying and failing? What if the greatest risk is never discovering what you're capable of when you give yourself completely to something that matters? What would change if you approached just one important area of your life with the mindset of obsession rather than average? Not frantic activity, but focused intensity. Not perfectionism, but the relentless pursuit of mastery. Not workaholism, but work infused with purpose and attention. The difference might seem subtle from the outside, but would feel transformative from within. The same actions performed with different intent and focus yield dramatically different experiences and results. Average goes through the motions. Obsession brings full presence to each motion. Average seeks to get tasks done. Obsession seeks to embody excellence in how tasks are done. Average works for external rewards. Obsession finds reward in the work itself. These distinctions might sound philosophical, but they translate into practical differences in how you approach each day. They determine whether you find energy or drain in your efforts. They shape whether you experience growth or stagnation over time. They decide whether you build a body of work you're proud of or simply accumulate years of showing up. Let me offer a specific exercise. For the next 7 days, choose one important activity and approach it with obsession rather than average. It might be your work, a creative project, a relationship, your health routine, or a learning opportunity. For this one domain, temporarily set aside notions of balance and moderation. Bring extraordinary focus and commitment. Raise your standards beyond what seems reasonable. Give more than seems necessary. Care more than seems sensible. Observe what happens, not just to your results, but to your experience. Notice how it feels to engage this way. Pay attention to the resistance that arises, both internal and external. Watch for the moments when something shifts from effort to flow. This 7-day experiment isn't about permanently restructuring your life. It's about experiencing firsthand the difference between average and obsessed approaches. It's about gathering personal evidence of what becomes possible when you commit fully rather than partially. For many who try this experiment, the results are eye-opening. They discover that what they thought were their limits were merely the boundaries of their comfort. They experience breakthroughs that had seemed impossible. They tap into capacities that had remained dormant under the reign of average. But perhaps most significantly, they discover that obsession isn't primarily about doing more. It's about bringing more of yourself to what you do. It's about presence and purpose rather than merely time and effort. This discovery changes everything. It reveals that the choice between obsession and average isn't fundamentally about external factors like time or resources. It's about internal factors, your mindset, your standards, your willingness to be fully engaged rather than holding back. This means that obsession is available to you right now, regardless of your circumstances. You don't need to quit your job, abandon your responsibilities, or restructure your entire life. You need only decide to bring your whole self to what matters most. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. But do it with the focus and commitment of the obsessed rather than the hesitation and reservation of the average. This shift from partial to full engagement changes not just outcomes but identity. It transforms how you see yourself and therefore what becomes possible for you. As your capacity grows through focused effort, goals that once seemed unreachable come within your grasp. The average person sets goals based on what seems reasonable given current capabilities. The obsessed person sets goals based on what matters deeply, then develops the capabilities required to achieve them. This fundamental difference in approach explains why the obsessed consistently outperform the average, even when starting with similar resources. Have you chosen them based on what seems comfortably achievable? Or have you chosen them based on what would be deeply meaningful if achieved? If your goals don't both excite and frighten you, they may be too small. If they don't require you to become more than you currently are, they may not be worthy of your potential. If they can be achieved without full engagement, they may not lead to the growth and fulfillment you seek. The cemetery is filled with unfulfilled potential. Dreams never pursued, books never written, businesses never started. Lives that stayed safely within the boundaries of average. Is that what you want for your story? When the final chapter closes, will you have lived a life of what if or a life of I did? The choice stands before you every single day. Be obsessed or be average. Average says, tomorrow I'll start. Obsession says, this moment matters. Average asks, what's the minimum required? Obsession asks, what's the maximum possible? Average seeks the path well-traveled. Obsession forges new trails. The difference between who you are and who you could be lies in this choice, not made once, but made daily, hourly, in those quiet moments when no one is watching. What will you choose? Will you join the masses who drift through life half awake, half committed, half alive? Or will you be counted among those who know the exhilaration of giving everything to something that matters? Some call it unreasonable. Perhaps it is. But all meaningful progress began with unreasonable commitment. Some call it extreme. I call it clarity. The clarity that comes from knowing what matters and having the courage to arrange your life accordingly. The truth you must confront is simple. There is no neutral ground. Every decision either moves you toward obsession or settles you deeper into average. Every hour invested or wasted. Every standard raised or lowered. Every risk taken or avoided. When you truly understand this truth, hesitation becomes impossible. The cost of average becomes too great to bear. The world doesn't need more reasonable people. It needs more unreasonably committed people. People obsessed with solving problems that matter. People obsessed with creating beauty where there was none. People obsessed with excellence when mediocrity would suffice. You were not born for average. That dissatisfaction you feel with halfway measures and compromised standards, that's not a flaw in your character. It's a compass pointing toward your potential. Follow it. Feed the hunger for excellence that gnaws at you. Embrace the obsession that others might label extreme. Because here's what I know with absolute certainty. 20 years from now, you won't regret the times you cared too much, tried too hard, or gave too fully. You'll regret the times you held back, played small, or chose comfort over growth. Be unreasonable in your commitment. Be unreasonable in your standards. Be unreasonable in your refusal to settle. The average life is full of reasonable choices and quiet regrets. The obsessed life is full of unreasonable courage and meaningful achievement. The door to extraordinary stands open before you. Will you step through? Remember, the world is changed by the obsessed, not by the average. Which will you be?